so much as the respect of, have everyone know their place and how the hierarchy works.
Yeah.
Certain people work better with rules and regulations and stuff, and certain people don't. Certain people need to be told to do things every hour, every day, and certain people just get on with it.
Yeah.
But the steadiness was quite up there as well.
Yeah.
So okay. It's no one likes change. We fear change, but most of the time. But change, it needs to be embraced every now and then. But as long as there's some sort of backbone and stability to it, so everyone knows what they should be doing and where they should be and how to do it, the steadiness is quite important as well. So that was quite high up there. But I think the dominance, from what I remember, was the leading trait.
That's it. And look, a big part of the criteria for this is setting like a fair, consistent, respectful example.
Yeah.
Generally, in terms of behavioural, if your kind of behavioural style or kind of predominant leadership style is one of dominance or more autocratic leadership style, so that's what's required for the job role sometimes.
Yeah.
Whereas also
you mentioned not everyone likes it, but
not everyone likes it, but it's necessary to get the job done and get results.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you mentioned, people respond differently to different styles. So I guess the one good thing to remember from kind of looking at this and taking it on board is that, all the best, there's a suggestion that kind of all the best kind of managers and leaders, and a manager can be very different from a leader as well, is the fact that you can remain flexible to the needs of a business, whether that might be task orientated, and also take into account the needs of individuals as well. So actually, any of those four, you could probably adopt any of those four styles at any one time, depending on what the situation calls for, or depending on what the individual needs to get the best out of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that flexibility is kind of key, and that comes alongside emotional intelligence as well, knowing how to act in certain situations, like empathy, for example, is a good example of emotional intelligence. If the situation requires a more empathetic approach, then you're going to know to do that rather than be kind of dominant and in that scenario. So it's really, once you're able to understand what the different styles are, and being able to recognize the importance of remaining flexible to the needs of the business and individuals, and that's important.
The flexibility is definitely something that I have to improve on, because I haven't been as empathetic or as understanding as should be. I'm sort of different person as to what I was a few years ago, and the empathy kind of went out the window a little bit.
Yeah.
So it needs to be brought back in.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so that kind of covers behavioural styles, emotional intelligence. We've looked at examples of that, and the importance of remaining flexible to it as well, which is great. You'll know in yourself, Adam, as well. Certain you'll know, the more you work with people, we mentioned it before, the more you develop relationships with people and rapport, you're going to know what they're like as individuals. You're going to know what they require in order to manage and lead them, effectively. Is that just frozen?
Can you hear me, Richard?
I can.
Right, sorry, man. I don't know what happened there.
That's okay. The screen just froze, I think, or maybe lost internet for a second.
Right, okay. You got my picture as well. You're back.
That's okay. Yeah, we're back.
All right. Sorry about that.
We're back. No, that's okay, mate. That's no problem at all. Okay, so we just finished off with kind of looking at learning styles and that kind of thing. We we looked at your 360 SWOT analysis as well, and we, you know, the importance of putting together a plan, and we reviewed that.
Yeah.
So now we can, this will be a continuation of style. So looking at whether you're more logical, supportive, idea orientated, and detail orientated as well. And the benefit of kind of looking at these again is the importance of being able to adopt different styles and adapt your approach depending on what it is.
Yeah.
So you've got logical, detail orientated, supportive, or idea orientated. Now the chances are at some point in time you have to be all of these within your job, within your management job role.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, moving forward. So we mentioned about emotional intelligence, and this was something that you kind of earmarked on your personal development plan, Adam, as well. So
yeah,
you've got this this model here. So Salvaloy and Mayer. So you've got perception. So this kind of ties in a little bit with your Hari window of how that, you know, self-perception and external perception. So you correctly express emotions to others. You can use it. So you can use emotions to facilitate thought in a proactive way. You understand. So you can understand emotions, emotional language, and signals. So if an example of, and then management, so you manage emotions to achieve the goals. So if I was to give you an example, Adam, if a member of your staff comes in the morning, they're visibly upset, how might you deal with that scenario?
If they're upset from before they've come into work, it's obviously a personal issue, so it wouldn't be something that would need to be dealt with in front of an audience.
Yeah.
So, you know, taking them away one-on-one and trying to understand what has happened, or if they want to talk about it at all, or, you know, if they want to just, you know, what we can do to sort of help them through it if we can.
Yeah.
Or, you know, some of them might just want to forget about it while they're at work and use work as a distraction. So they might want to be kept busy.
And that's it. And you raise a really important point there, Adam, as well. And that's again, we come back to knowing your staff and building. The more you build relationships with them and understand them as people, not just as members of staff, the more effective your leadership can be, and you can work with them.
Yeah.
And that can very much be the case. They might not want to talk about it. They might want to use work as a distraction potentially. And so you must, you know, as managers, we need to respect that.
Yeah.
And allow them to kind of make that decision. Obviously, if there's a continuation of that, and this is happening a lot, then you might think, well, you know, this needs to be maybe addressed with HR, or it might need to be escalated, for example. But that's quite a good kind of small example of how you might deal with that. So emotion intelligence as an essential trait for a leader. So we know that that's important to kind of know people, to have a grasp of how to act and how to behave in certain situations.
Yeah.
And this is very much what this unit is about, and probably to do with communication styles as well, Adam, and moving into the next unit as well. It's all about being able to have knowledge, being able to apply that knowledge and to practical situations.
Yeah.
And knowing how to act, and you know, having a grasp of that, and again, that might be you know, choosing which leadership style to use. It might be situational management. It might be looking at which you know, which learning style to accommodate.
Yeah.
And things like that. So again, it's all about you know, adopting different styles, and once we understand that, we're able to apply them a little bit more successfully.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've already done learning. Okay, so self-awareness continued. So with all of those, whether it's the Honey and Mumford Learning Styles quiz, the 360 SWOT analysis, self-analysis and reflection, and putting together a personal development plan, it's really, really key. And you mentioned it earlier. It's really important to be honest with yourself, and able to self-reflect, and really look at how you're doing. What's the needs analysis? from a business perspective, from your job role perspective. What do you need to work on? But other things might be personal traits, characteristics that you might want to feel you work on as well. That might be that you might want to learn French. You might want to improve, getting better at a video game, for example, or something. Whereas work objectives might be, probably very different to those things. So it's really being able to, once we understand these techniques and these reflective techniques, we can kind of use them subjectively and apply them as we need to. Noticing behavior patterns is important as well. Noticing areas to strengthen, recognizing what your core values are as a person, and how they relate to the core values of the business that you work with. Like Bidvest's core values, people first, for example. The strength of the business is the people, and you make Bidvest make sure they look after the well-being and the welfare of their individuals, because people are their strengths. That's kind of the value, the tagline. Being forgiven, so being realistic, being gentle with yourself. We all make mistakes. So it's being able to be reflective of that and using it proactively.
Yeah.
And keeping track of your own self-reflection. As I say, something like the personal development plan, we can look at that and reflect back on that as an ongoing document, probably every 12 weeks, like every 3 months.
Okay.
Whenever we do a formal review, and we can summarize that. Where are we with these things? Do we need to continue them? Can we think of anything more that we need to look at? Yeah. Okay. Are you happy with everything we've gone through so far, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I think, as I say, you did a really good job. That it was very much detail orientated. All the work that you did, it contained a lot of detail, which was really, really good. So from my perspective as a trainer, your understanding of this stuff is clear. It's really the application of that knowledge with practical examples that we'll try and capture within these sessions. Okay. And the benefit of that is, once we have these examples, is then being able to talk through them and being able to use them in kind of 15 months time during the professional discussion part of your endpoint assessment. Okay, so next, Adam, we're going to look at some reflective practice models. So I don't think these were in session 1 e-learning, so this is a little bit of teaching and learning on our part of the session.
Okay.
So the first one we're going to look at is Kolb. So Kolb's experimental learning cycle. So this cycle, again, can be quite subjective in that it can be applied to most scenarios, most situations. So most people will have a concrete experience. So this might be a task that you're used to doing every day. You'll then have reflective observation. So you'll look back on the task. How did it go compared to how you thought it would go based on your knowledge of it? Was it the same or was it different? What did you learn from it? At this point, you'll then have abstract conceptualization. So you'll draw conclusions and you'll learn from that experience, i.e., it's exactly what I expected it to be, or it was different to what I expected it to be, or it's different. My approach was different, or the result was different from using the same approach. Why was that? So it's very much kind of, what went well, why did it go well? If something didn't go well, you review that. Why did it not go well? How can we change the approach next time, or maybe use a different approach next time? And that will then mark the active experimentation phase. So having considered the result of the concrete experience and you reflected upon it, are you going to do it differently next time? Or you might think, I might try a different approach. And then you actually carry that out. So that's kind of the 4 stages. So can you think of an example of a task that you might do like every day or every week, Adam?
Yeah, there's plenty. We do the same. Pretty much, repetition is pretty much what keeps us going here. So it's the same sort of tasks of processing and X-raying goods to make sure that they adhere to and conform to the security guidelines of the building. That's very, very consistent and something that we have to do every day.
Yeah.
As well as processing and delivering the goods as well. Again, it's just repetition. That's the bread and butter of our job and job role here.
That's
from
it.
a security side of it and from a mailroom side of it.
That's it. So from a processes point of view, you're going to have certain regulation and policy that you need to follow.
Yeah.
So that kind of governs the process of how you do things. You might then find like a quicker way of doing it, for example, or you might find that there might be a new bit of legislation that you need to follow in terms of X-raying this stuff, which might change your process.
Yeah.
But generally, as long as you can reflect upon an experience. So we use tasks as an example here, but in general terms, if you can reflect on any experience, whether it's positive or negative, and be constructive with it, what went well, why did it go well? Just the same as, if it didn't go well, why did it not go well?
Yeah.
What do we need to improve on? So a broader example for your department might be like a fire drill, like a fire evacuation procedure.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to need to know what role they have within that and what they need to do. If something doesn't go well, or if generally it does go well, but there's an area that maybe didn't, or communication wasn't clear enough, or maybe there was a relatively new member of staff that you need to bring up to scratch, you might then earmark that as a training need for that particular person or that particular area, or Ken or Dennis might review that and think, well, we need to change this because it's not quick enough, or we need to make next month's team training, emergency operating procedures, or specifically fire evacuation to address that. And you might try a different tactic. But generally, that's how it'll work, and we can apply this to most things in life that we go through. So there's something that we do every day, or that we're used to, that we're going to have a general opinion of how we think it's going to work and how we think we should do it. And then at some point that might change, or we might recognize there's a better way, or it might be enforced on us.
Yeah.
So we have reflective observation. We might then have abstract conceptualization. So from the learning experience, could we do it differently? Why do we need to do it differently? We might then think, in your case, you might then have a meeting and say, how are we going to make this fire drill run more smoothly? Are we going to have more people in the control room? Do we need to have more communication? Do we need to have more training? And you might then apply that approach next time. So there's part of it that is theory, i.e. we're going to try to improve it by doing this, this, and this. And then you're going to experiment by applying that. And then effectively the cycle then starts again. What was the experience? What was the expectation? We review it. Did it work as we wanted it to? If yes, brilliant. If no, how can we reflect on it? And it goes on and on. So it's quite a basic model that can be applied in most situations, but it's quite a useful one because it's so flexible.
Yeah.
But are you happy with that?
Yeah, very. Yeah.
That, and we've used the fire drill example there. Okay. Another one is a Sean reflective model as well. So it's reflection in action.
Right.
So you actually reflect during the event, or whilst you're doing something. Ideas will pop into your head, i.e. we could do this differently next time, or by doing it this way, it might improve the process. So you can then make maybe a more informed decision in deciding how to act, and you might change it. So a fire drill might not be realistic in this scenario because it's quite time sensitive. Whereas if you're doing a task that allows you to change the way you're doing something whilst you're doing it, then that's more kind of reflection in action.
Yeah, one seems a bit more impulsive and a bit more immediate.
That's it. Whereas the next one, it's reflection on action. So you reflect on something that has happened. So it's very much after the event.
Yeah.
What would you do differently if it was to happen again? Use new information or perspectives to inform and process your actions. So these are so Sean suggests that there's two two parts to reflection. One, where you can actually change what you're doing during the event, or kind of more of a retroactive decision where you're reflecting after the event. So there's the two that you've got. So both of those are relatively, quite straightforward, and we can talk about those in there with practical examples. So just looking at those, Adam, can you think of any examples of both of those? So the reflection on action would be kind of like the fire drill example that we've just done, or it might be where you've done some training with a member of the team, and actually you might think, oh, the method in which we chose to train them maybe wasn't that effective. So maybe next time you might then introduce them, or you might get your team to fill out the Honey and Mumford Learning Styles questionnaire, or you might get them to look at kind of VARC learning styles and feed back to you and say, I feel like I'm this one. So from a training perspective, you can then say, right, well, next time, whenever we do training or whatever we're doing a new task, this is how we're going to do it. Or you might think there's certain things like x-raying parcels, things like that. If you get a new member of staff in, there's kind of only a few ways that you can do that. You're going to have to show them practically, but also maybe talk through them and maybe give them like a written kind of flow diagram of instructions to do it as well. So you're accommodating different learning styles. So reflection on action might be quite good from that perspective.
Yeah, very.
Okay. Okay. We're now going to look at a little bit of inclusion and bias and unconscious bias, Adam. So my first question would be, what's your understanding of what bias is, or what unconscious bias might be?
It seems, if it's the textbook definition of bias, then it's favouring one way or another, or one person or another for some reason. Maybe because you prefer or like that person more, or you like the other person less. It's you don't. Unconsciousness is the obvious. You're not aware that you're doing it, but if you're unaware that you're doing it, you could unconsciously be sabotaging someone or hurting their feelings. Yeah,
absolutely. So we mentioned this before, didn't we? So bias is more deliberate. It sounds awful, but it is something that you might be aware of and doing it anyway. Whereas unconscious bias might stem from kind of workplace culture. It might stem from kind of upbringing. It might stem from you having an opinion about something, of how something should be. Due to your background, due to your upbringing, that's shaped your opinion. Whereas we need to be open to the possibility that other people with different upbringings, different opinions, might view it differently. That's why there's so many arguments on Twitter and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, but generally unconscious bias is something that, again, it might be workplace culture related. And if you come into a new industry, a new workplace, and you think, oh, this is how it is, this is normal, this is the right thing to do. Whereas an external perspective might deem it not acceptable for some people. And worst case scenario, as you said, it can lead to things like feelings of discrimination, bullying, harassment. HR need to get involved. So it can be really negative to workplace culture and have a really negative impact. Okay. So we said unconscious bias. So it's the inclination or prejudice for or against one person or group, especially in a way that's considered unfair. So pretty much exactly what you said. Inclusion. So inclusion is the practice or policy of including people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalised, such as those who have physical or mental disabilities and members or minority groups. So this is really big for a lot of workplaces, and I know that Bidfest is pretty hot on this in inclusion.
Yeah, they are, definitely.
Making everybody feel valued.
Yeah.
Making everybody feel part of the team. A great deal of equality, diversity, and really understanding that. And I know that there's kind of training and education on this for you guys as well, which is really, really important. And the education part of that isn't to be underplayed, because again, once people are a little bit more educated on this stuff, they can maybe understand the reasons why, and it opens their eyes to, the reason why this is important.
Yeah.
A really good example of where of your site is when there's guys that do Ramadan, where you might be a little bit more accommodating on the rota, where you might allow those guys to have a couple of kind of 10-minute breaks during the day. The energy levels are going to be low, and you educate the entire team on that. This is what's going to happen. This is why we're doing it. These guys are going to be doing Ramadan. It's important to them as individuals, as members of staff, so therefore it's important to us. And I know that your team is a really, or definitely at 100 Bishopsgate is a really strong example of that, where there's a really strong kind of clan culture where everybody supports each other and actively tries to accommodate and help each other as well.
Yeah.
So inclusion is hugely important. And again, this might be something that you might get asked in the endpoint assessment. So what's your understanding of inclusion? Can you give me an example of it in your workplace?
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important? If there isn't inclusion, what can be the fallout? Things like that. So it is really important to be consider inclusion always, and the fact that even though 99% of your staff might be really happy with a policy or kind of a team culture, but if one person isn't, then that can be a problem.
Yeah.
That can be a problem, and it's that might have to be addressed one way or another. Okay, so there's different bias theory, Adam, as well. So things that might come. So there's confirmation, conformity, and affinity. So an example of that might be like a gender bias, for example. So it might well be that if you get a really heavy parcel into the post room, and you've got a female member of staff, you might say to them, oh, I'll do that one because it's going to be too heavy for you. And you might think, oh, well, hang on a minute, that might not be. That's a perception that women aren't as strong as men, for example.
Yeah.
And even though that might be born out of kind of chivalry and you doing kind of the right thing to try and help them out, all it takes is if it's said or done in the wrong way, then they might think that, well, that's I'm being discriminated against because of gender, for example.
Yeah.
The next one might be conformity, which is which kind of takes into account race or religion. So it's kind of pigeonholing people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you've got affinity as well, like age. So typically you might think, oh, generally more people of a more senior age might not be good with technology. For example, that might be a kind of a false bias that might be that's kind of irrelevant in today's society. There's kind of feelings that people have that. So there's lots of kind of bias for us to be aware of, and to make sure that it's not present. So the next one, Adam, is when are we most at risk and how can we avoid it? So again, we're talking about education is a big one. Yes. So with Bidfest, Bidfest have a lot of kind of training and education and induction phases on this kind of stuff. It's up to, I'd say it's something that is will be kind of cascaded through an organisation like Bidfest, so it comes from the top down.
Yeah.
It then goes to kind of managers and directors of sites to kind of manage that culture and make sure that it's a positive one. But it's also up to the staff and everybody to kind of buy into that. to create a really good positive workplace culture, of one where there's no bias and there is inclusion all the time. And actually your site is a really good example of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so just quickly, Adam, what do you think the benefits are of having a diverse workplace? So by diverse, I might mean kind of a range of people, whether it's age, gender, background, religion.
I'd like you say, I think 100 Bishopsgate is very, very diverse for a workplace. You know, there's people from all walks of life, different races, religions. The age group varies.
Yeah.
You know, it can. The benefits of it, you know, is you know, you say, for instance, if it's perceived as biased or not, the slightly older people have got more experience, whereas you know, they can pass that down to the slightly younger or newer people. You know, it sort of opens you up a little bit to being educated about stuff that you might not necessarily know.
Yeah.
You know, working with people from different countries and different religions and stuff, such as you say about, you know, if you have a member of your team who's partaking in Ramadan and stuff,
Yeah.
you know, other people might not understand it or why, or see why there's beneficial treatment for it, what they might perceive as beneficial treatment. But, you know, you have to try and sort of explain that it works one way for one person and different for another.
Yep, exactly right. And we've already spoken about the potential negative effects if that kind of culture and that feeling isn't in place, and there isn't inclusion within a workplace.
Yeah,
it can have serious, you know, connotations and issues. Okay, right, Adam. So moving on, we're going to look at again, management of self, approaches to managing your workload. Now, we looked at some of the resources on this, didn't we? Kind of time management,
yeah,
prioritization techniques like the ABCDE method, eat that frog, how you manage your day. From when you come in, how do you manage your day? So technically, you've got a rota and a schedule of tasks on most days and weeks. You know exactly what you're going to be doing on what days, at what times. It's sometimes not always as simple as that. Sometimes things come up that you need to reprioritize. So if you were going to do a task that was relatively important, but something actually even more important then comes up that you need to address even quicker, you might then need to either delegate that to another member of staff or push it back to an afternoon. Just as there's things that you can plan for. For example, if you do an end of week audit, or an end of day audit or a handover, you're not going to be able to do that at 7 o'clock in the morning, because it's irrelevant. So even though it's a really important task to do in terms of an A task, it's not applicable at that point in time. So you might then put in an amount of time in the afternoon, like between 4 till 5, to make sure that's done properly. So it's not always about doing the most important task first. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's about planning and organisation to make sure that that's, you know, you have time to do those things.
Yeah.
And that kind of falls in line with operational plans, project plans, personal objectives, and setting targets and KPIs. You're going to have your own ones of these. You're going to have ones that are dictated by the needs of the business. So generally, that's it. So one of the other resources was the Eisenhower matrix that we looked at as well. So there's going to be important tasks, some of which are urgent, i.e., it has to be done now. And there's important tasks that are non-urgent, so you can schedule a time to do it.
Yeah.
Like the handover, for example, at the end of the day. You've then got non-important tasks that you can then delegate to other people, or if they're literally no longer important and they're going to have no effect on your working day, whether you do them or not, you can actually delete it from your to-do list.
Yeah.
So you've got this matrix here. So generally people can look at a list of tasks every day when they come in, and they could use like this Eisenhower matrix, for example, or like a prioritization technique like ABCDE. And you can use these methods to kind of schedule your day. What am I going to do and when am I going to do them? Or when am I going to schedule other people to do them? When am I going to delegate these and allocate tasks to your team to do as well? Because there might be things that that might be a better use of your time, Adam. There might be tasks in your job role that only you can do. So you're not going to waste your time doing other tasks that that the other staff have got a skill set to be able to do.
Yeah.
That's just managing the time effectively. Okay, so time management techniques. So there's 4 Ds of time management. So delete if it's irrelevant, if it's not going to have any effect. Defer. So make sure you plan a time on a slot on a day or a time where you're able to do that. Do, so that's more urgent tasks. You're going to get those done straight away and prioritize them, or you're going to delegate. So all of those kind of map into the same thing. So that prioritization technique we spoke of, like that ABCDE method, is really similar to the Eisenhower matrix.
Yeah.
And really similar to the 4 Ds of time management as well.
Yeah, it's just all prioritization.
That's it. Okay, so if we move back just briefly to your personal development plan, again, Adam, how we put that together. So we did it by looking at by conducting a SWOT analysis, doing things like learning styles, doing all of these tools and resources, gaining feedback, and able to put that together along with the discussion with myself. And we were able to identify areas, develop a written plan, agree it with your. So going forward, you could use that with Ken or Dennis, for example. The next time you have an annual appraisal, you could use that within your appraisal. They will be able to give you feedback as well. You can then decide what you're going to do about it. So you schedule activities. What am I going to do? Am I going to go around and read up on that? Am I going to do training? Do I need to reflect? So you create a strategy or tactics of how you're going to go about it.
Yeah.
And then you can modify as required. So what we're going to do every 12 weeks with your personal development plan, where are we with those things? Have we kind of accomplished them? Have we got to the point where you're happy with them? At which point, you know, your own individual needs or the needs of the business might have changed. So then you might have some new ones to put in as well. And at that point, the cycle will start again. So we'll then develop a new written plan and we'll add to it.
Okay.
Okay. In terms of planning self-development, these are all things or tools that you could use. So you could do it through shadowing. You could do it through online reading, like resources like this course, reading materials, through actually doing activities. If you were more of a kinesthetic learner, it might be kind of shadowing and doing activities and doing face-to-face coaching and training. Or you might be asked to attend like a network or a seminar, something like that. I know that every I don't know, is this with the SIA license, Adam? Do you have to have an SIA license?
It's preferred if I do. I had one before, but I need to redo it again. Yeah. It would definitely benefit me and the building if I did.
That's it. So that might be an example of that. So every 6 months, or I think it used to be every year. It may now be every 6 months that you're required to update it. So you're going to have to be allocated time to be able to fulfill the documentation and go through that, the application process to then work with the SIA license, just like the rest of the guys do.
Yeah.
And that's going to have to be fitted into a schedule every 6 months where the guys will be, all doing it at various points in time. And Ken and Dennis and the higher line managers are going to be aware of that. Staff are going to be made aware of it to be accountable and responsible for their actions. And say, look, every 6 months, so next September, for example, we know that that's when it next comes up. We're going to have to earmark a time in August to make sure that's done. and get it done. Just as a small example.
Yeah.
Okay. Also in regard to kind of SWOT 360, management of self, so feedback mechanisms. So how do we gain feedback in work? So through one-to-ones, through appraisals, through key performance indicators, through observations of others, like a SWOT 360 or a Yahari window, through external feedback, like through customers, or through kind of negative feedback or complaints, as it were, through online reviews, engagement surveys, and self-reflection.
Yeah.
So that might be more relevant. So kind of engagement surveys and customer feedback. So towards the front of the building, where you've got the front of house guys, round the other side.
Yeah.
So the front receptions. So Bidvest or the site managers might ask, or Brookfield might send a survey to all the tenants, or the businesses that occupy the floor space. And they might send them a survey just saying, how do you find